Hello guys and welcome to Shogun 2. Today we are talking about war. How does it work? Primarily in the realm of on the campaign map, the actual war aspect, not the battles. I'll give the battles their own guide. How does war work? So quite simply, let's look at some UI elements first and then we'll talk about it. It's actually pretty simple. First and foremost, we have armies. These are very important for war. You can see some right here. They have the flag of the faction that they are following. This is one of mine. This is coming out of a settlement, but there is an army there. And then this is an enemy. This circle around a unit shows kind of like a zone of control in a way. You cannot move into there without getting into a fight with that unit. At the same time, your zone of control determines, as I hover over this, as if I'm going to right click, which I'll hold it just to show you, and it will set a path that will then go intercept that enemy, which I will just not do. But as if I were to do that, you'll see there's another arrow. Let me get that out of the way. Popping out of the town, that is like a reinforcement range. So if there's other armies near my army that's going to be getting into a fight, then they can actually come assist me and arrive somewhere else in the battlefield, theoretically dependent on the direction of arrival compared to your direction and the enemy's direction. Sometimes this could lead to reinforcements coming in right behind the enemy army, which can get a little awkward. But that is how having your units works. That is how attacking works, and that is what reinforcements are. So one of these armies can be 20 units in a stack. So we have right here a general and then 4 different units of different types. There are normal units of differing types. There are generals, and then there are more special hero type characters. For example, like little ninja groups and things like that. You do not need a hero type or a general for any of your stacks. You can have 20 of just normal units, and if you manage to get your hands on them, you could have 20 hero type units. Now, those hero types are not necessarily better, they just have access to tricks that normal units and generals might not. Generals do as well, they have a lot of buffs, and the normal units have the numbers and the fighting capacity that you need. The generals are a lot smaller than normal units, and those special type units as well, but they again have their special abilities. If you ever want to recruit units, then you're just going to select whatever army you are, whether you're just in a part of your province really, or in the actual castle town. You hit recruit. You could do this in a town as well. You just recruit directly into a town, and then you will have the different units that you can recruit. It'll show you where you are recruiting them from. This is in case you're not recruiting in the town in general. This is considered a global recruitment of sorts, so it takes time. You'll have to recruit it, and then it'll have to get to you, so it actually takes some extra time. Whereas if you just recruit in the town, it's pretty much instant, and then you can move to wherever you want immediately after. Something to keep in mind. Recruiting units in this Total War is quite simple compared to even other Total Wars. There's these base units you can get. It will show you if there's a building not present, you need to recruit a certain type of unit. The actual unit selection is not incredibly high. There's differing versions of units for every single faction pretty much, and different factions do certain things better. For example, a bow samurai, or even Chosokabi bow ashigaru. So what these names mean, and I know this might be difficult because it's like another language, but Chosokabi is the faction that we have picked. Bow is essentially the type of weapon, and then Ashigaru is kind of like a peasant unit, whereas Samurai is, to put it in the most European terms possible, but it's not exact, like a knight unit. It's just an upgrade. It's just better. It costs way more money. You could see twice the amount of money here. It takes twice the amount of time to recruit. If you can look in this little pop-up here, you'll see the upkeep cost is way worse. The samurai are better in terms of morale. They don't have as many units, as many men. You see 120 here versus 160. And then that right there, thankfully, simply enough, is how basically every normal unit in the game works. You have the name of the faction, if there is one. You'll see right here, the Yari Ashigaru does not have the name of a faction, because this is just a very basic spear peasant infantry. So Yari, that's like the weapon, and then Ashigaru, like peasant unit. As opposed to the reason we have a Chosokabe bow Ashigaru is because bows are our specialty as a faction. Now, other factions can get bow Ashigaru if they would like. And then there's even more that's not appearing here, some that can become available via technology and buildings, etc. For example, there's Naginata infantry, which is kind of a bladed spear type unit. They're not as good at resisting charges or charging as actual Yari units, but they're more versatile at the same time. Kind of like a jack of all trades but master of none when it comes to melee. There's also gun units as well that stand out. Difference between bow and gun units is bows can shoot over things, whereas guns shooting forward at something that they have an unobstructed line of sight to are going to do way better. But these are matchlocks we're talking about. Very high reload time. All right. So that's basically what you need to know about units, especially on this level. Now, let's go over some more UI elements here. So when you do hover over an army, you could see whoever is leading it in terms of like a general, if there is one. You see we got this Kira Masayo guy. He's written down there. See the faction, it says it's us. Now, if we hover over another army, we'll see these are rebels. This is not another faction. These are rebels. And we are at war with the rebels. Generally, you're going to be at war with all rebels everywhere as a default. They don't really care who they fight. Other factions, meanwhile, you don't need to have an army selected. You can. It's just going to give you different information. But basically, you see this is the Miyoshi faction, and we are at peace. So that's how we get that information. But separate to that, there's also over here, we can't see the town belonging to this faction, but I can also hover over the territory and get the same information we see here. So we know the Kono are here, and we know we are at war with them. Over here, we just see Sanuki. We don't know what's here. We just know that this province exists, just like this is Awa, and this is Iyo. Then there are the markers. You can see the relations via these markers right here. So yellow marks our borders, red marks those that we are at war with, white marks those that we are at peace with. You can trespass at any time by just running into somebody else's lands. I would not recommend you do that because that would really piss them off. But if your goal is to attack them and you don't want them to be able to react, then just running into their lands to then surprise attack them is a pretty serviceable idea. Nobody will be happy about that diplomatically. There is, in the diplomacy screen, which I have covered in a different guide, a integrity rating that the AI will judge you with as well. But it recovers, and it's usually pretty worth it. With your army selected, you can see this kind of yellow zone, I suppose. It is a maybe not so clear marker on exactly where you can move. And just to give you an example, you can hold right click instead of clicking it just to get an idea of what's going on here. And you'll see like this, once you get out of that yellow, then it'll start turning red, showing that that would go into the next turn. And you can go even further than that, where it goes blue into a turn after that, green. That does have a max though, something to note. And it'll show you where your zone of control will end up as well. You can just kind of like hover over something and then click away if you don't want to commit to that. Holding lets you kind of cancel. When it comes to actual fighting, which I'll show you kind of how to get started with that in a bit here, you're pretty much just going to right click on whatever your target is, and then you'll initiate a battle. An army does have the option to run away. I'll show you that as well. Or attack, you know, you get those reinforcements. And then it's different if you're on a siege. Over here, if I attacked a city, then instead I'd first have to create some siege equipment to get in through the walls of the castle town. Simultaneously, there's also these small structures with the little flags that make up what is essentially the economic and otherwise buildings of a province, separate to the castle town. I could go after those and quote unquote attack them, to sabotage them. And special units can do this as well. Special units like a ninja, for example, that you can recruit separately, but usually in the same place once you have the relevant buildings set up that you must first grow your town via population growth to acquire. I talk about this in some of my other guides. When it comes to how you actually get into a war, you see we start in some. The game will start you off with an interesting situation to take part in. You want to go to your diplomacy here and select a faction that you are not at war with, such as the Miyoshi here we are indifferent with. Enter negotiations. You can declare war right from this screen, and you'll get an idea of who their allies are that will join the war and assist them. Maybe they can technically choose to not join, but expect most to do so. You can also preview it right here under allies. You can also see their enemies. And then you can also kind of request to join the wars of allies as well, or try to get them to join yours, or even demand someone break an alliance as part of a bigger trade agreement. Talk about that more in my diplomacy guide. You could also just, again, go right-click attack a city like this, and then when you get there, or an enemy stack as well, an enemy army, right-click that, and then you will be able to just declare war on them, just like that. Very simple and easy. The same goes for naval combat. It's just we don't have a port that can allow naval combat, but everything about it works the exact same way functionally on the map as controlling these armies does. You'll see the graphics are a little weird outside of here. It's because we haven't discovered that. You just have to go discover it, and then you'll get a better idea of what it looks like. Same thing goes for the ocean. One big difference is, you see how we could see these little dudes walking around? These are like caravans moving trade goods. At sea, we can actually raid these just by going and like parking on top of these lines, and, you know, if they belong to our enemies. So that's something to keep in mind that's a little different. If I go and just stand right over here, I'm not necessarily going to make any big thing happen. But the naval routes in this game are susceptible to that. Raiding works differently in basically every Total War game. It's vastly different in newer ones, so don't get confused about that if you're coming from one of the newer ones. But this guide is aimed towards beginners, so I'd be surprised if you made it this far already knowing how most of this works. I guess I also just want to show you real quick on the diplomacy screen. If you select someone that you are at war with, you can request peace, and then it opens all the other options of diplomacy again. But there's also even one where you could just say, yo dude, become my vassal, and this is part of a peace treaty. But also, if I take over someone's final city, their final castle town, I'll be able to just make them into a vassal just for free, right? Quote unquote free, right? Right there if I so choose. Now, let's take a look at battles. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just right click. We're going to move up to him. We move along. This game is I go, you go turn-based, so they can't really choose to run away from me. Well, they can, but they have to wait till I get here. If I was attacked, I would be prompted as during an AI turn, I am being attacked. And one of these options down here would be to actually run away. And it would be like this option right here. I can retreat right now, even though I started this battle. I started this and I can run away from it. There's a quick save. I suggest making good use of this. And you could see right now exactly all the forces involved here. How many will be deployed? How many will be reinforcing? You see, we have slightly more than they do. 760 to their 620. They have a light cavalry which will be acting as their general unit. There will always be a general unit even if you do not make and assign one. It just kind of takes one of the units that they have and it makes that one the general for the purposes of being a leader that can die and cause the army to rout. But they don't get any of the buffs that a general would actually be able to like bestow onto others. Now, you see here, this is second army I can click on. This is how you see reinforcements. There will always be the main army, but other armies can appear showing the picture of their leaders when there are more. And this can be just not yours. This can also be allies, and you could be assisting allies, and allies could be assisting your enemies as well. The allies of your enemies, not your allies. And anybody else can essentially just come in and reinforce. And depending on your battle settings, there's like a big battles option in the options. You can have 2 full armies from everybody on the screen at one time, or you can have small armies only, which limits these campaign fights specifically to 20 units versus 20 units, one stack versus one stack, essentially. It's up to you. The normal battles outside of the campaign can be larger, but if there's more armies, then they will actually just reinforce what's already there anyway. So if my Yari Ashigaru dies and there was any other army that had more units, then that would just kind of spawn in after the fact at a designated reinforcement point. As for the options here, you could see relatively how the game is judging the strength of my force versus the strength of the opposing forces. This is not exact. There is a penalty in here for the player, something like a 20% penalty to the player, just for being the player. And the relevance of this bar really is not to exactly tell you your chances of winning. It's to tell you your chances of winning an auto-resolve battle. And now every single Total War game has, well, every era of Total War has a much different feel to the auto-resolve. In this game, being slightly past 50% will result in a lot of my units potentially getting slaughtered. In some other games, it can result in a knockout win where I barely lose anything. These are extremes. Most of it will happen within those extremes, but the auto-resolve is essentially if you don't want to take part in the actual battle system of the game, which some might not. You might just be here for the grand strategy portion of the map, and you might not like the real-time tactics battles. Well, this is here for you. But this works most effectively the bigger of an advantage you have on this bar. In basically every Total War, it's less so in this one and ones before it, but especially newer ones, and somewhat true in this one. This is where it kind of started to change a little bit. If you have like a full yellow bar and you auto-resolve, you could just do way better if you just auto-resolve. Infinitely better than actually fighting the battle. This is something that you're really going to have to feel out in every Total War game for yourself, but you'll get the hang of it eventually. This button is how you fight the battle, and you'll get similar options if you're attacked during an AI's turn. You can see the province that you're going to be fighting in, just in case you weren't sure. There are preset maps for everywhere based on terrain, which you can see here, including the castle town, and what province you're in. So that could give you an idea of what you're going to be getting yourself into as well. The factions appear above the unit. This rebel unit has the Chosokabi emblem because it's the Chosokabi rebel, so that's just why they gave it to that. Whenever you look at this screen on a siege, you'll have the ability to make siege equipment as well, but it's mostly just for supporting. It's not as relevant as in other games. In these older Total Wars, the preparation of siege equipment tends to have more with giving yourself the time to prepare for a battle and gain the advantage than anything, whereas the actual units tend to be something you recruit into your army, generally speaking, if I try to give you some general advice on how that works. Will also tell me the time to when the enemy force just flat out surrenders and I just get the town without a fight anyway. They could choose to march out and fight me before that happens, and they very likely will, as one desperate act to harm the player. Otherwise, once the siege is prepared and you're ready to go, you simply hit to fight the battle if you're going to fight the battle. You'll get an idea of the map as you're on the loading screen here, and then you'll also get an idea of all the leaders, the different armies that will be taking part versus the enemies as well as a little bit of tips and some nice stylized art. If you are starting the battle, then you get a special option once the battle begins. You can wait for more favorable weather conditions before commencing your attack. You only can do this a certain amount before you just kind of have to commit to it. So let me just show you. Right now the weather's dry if I wait. Still dry if I wait. Still dry, and do note that the actual season on the campaign map has a lot to do with how this ends up. But let's wait the third time just so I could show you. Now we're out of chances, right? So if we were trying to get rid of rain or we were trying to get rid of snow or something, now we would just have to commit. So now we commit, we start the deployment, and there you go. We are officially in the deployment phase of a battle. Over here, we can see this is where the reinforcements will be coming from because there's a little blue arrow showing that that's where they're coming from. It's based on the direction. We're deploying in the north, but yeah, the settlement was to the northwest, and that's where our units are coming from. I can select any of these units that I want and change their formations a little bit. I can put them in controlled groups by doing control and then a number, which can put them into kind of a preset formation, but I can also toggle them down here, right here as you see. You can also control G or click this little lock if you just want to be able to have more freedom over the placement. Players of newer Total Wars, this is probably what you're going to be looking for. This was not a default back at this time, so this little lock is really what you're looking for. But if it is locked, you can pick the formation as well, just to give you an idea of generally what you could be working with here. Regardless, that right there is most of everything I think a beginner needs to know about warring, getting started, and getting into your first battle. I'll do a separate guide on the battles. I'm making a playlist of guides in the description below if you haven't already seen it. If you have any suggestions, then feel free to leave those in the comments below. If you have any questions, same thing. If I can't answer them, then I hope that somebody else can. Hopefully this guide has been helpful to you, however. And for now, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.